Wonderful. I welcome everyone. Today is the first in the series of session on generative AI. Let me do a quick introduction on the Emerging Tech COI for ACT-IAC. We have multiple groups. We have an artificial intelligence group, blockchain, IoT, smart infrastructure, DevSecOps, quantum, and we have the DIGs, the disruptors in government. The slide deck gives you a little bit of information about where you can find people, who the leadership is, and what the priorities are. Now let me paraphrase Renata. This meeting is recorded. We're going to ask you to please type questions in the chat for Felipe. We are requesting that you stay off mic and off camera, if you would please. And with that, let me introduce our guest speaker, Felipe Millon, who is the government go-to-market for OpenAI, who's going to talk to us about, multiple things about GenAI and OpenAI. Felipe, you can share your screen if you would, please.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So again, great to meet you all. My name is Felipe Millon. I lead government go-to-market here at OpenAI. I also apologize in advance. I am getting over the flu. I have a 9 and 7-year-old who unfortunately brought back the flu for me over the weekend. So just getting a little better. So a little bit on the mend now. But it is great to meet you all. So again, I lead our government go-to-market business here at OpenAI. So both working with different agencies at the federal and state and local level in adoption of AI technologies. Been at OpenAI for about a year. Prior to that, spent 9 years at Amazon, where did a lot of work with AWS and specifically with generative AI at Amazon as well. So to kick us off, I thought I'd just kind of do a quick demo of ChatGPT, and then I'll jump to some slides, and then we'll spend most of the time going back to some demos. So get this off here. Hey, chat. Good morning. Oh. Try that again. Hey, chat. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. What's up?
Hey, chat. I'm doing a live demo right now for an organization called ACT-IAC, ACT-IAC. Can you first of all say hi to the audience for me?
Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. Hope you're all having a fantastic day.
Hey, chat. Can you search the web? Tell me a little bit about ACT-IAC and a little bit about what the organization does.
ACT-IAC, or the American Council for Technology and Industry Advisory Council, is a nonprofit founded in 1979. It focuses on enhancing government performance through tech. It provides a neutral platform for government and industry leaders to collaborate, share knowledge, and develop innovative solutions.
Awesome. Well, appreciate that. So, what specifically we're talking about here is with the subcommittee or the subgroup on artificial intelligence. So obviously we're showing you off right now, ChatGPT and kind of this voice mode and what it can do. What are some ways that ACT-IAC can work on supporting AI adoption in the federal government, or what are some thoughts you have around that?
That's exciting. ACT-IAC can support AI adoption by fostering collaboration between government and industry experts, hosting workshops, and creating best practices for AI implementation. They can also help with ethical guidelines, ensuring transparency, and addressing challenges like data privacy. Hosting events to share success stories and lessons learned would be super helpful too.
Awesome. Hey, chat, and one perspective I want to pull in here is the perspective of the current administration. So, and how they're thinking about AI. I think that was summarized very well in a speech JD Vance did, maybe it was about a month or two ago in Paris at an AI summit. Can you search the web, find out about JD Vance's speech in Paris at that AI summit, and can you summarize that for us?
At the Paris AI Summit, Vice President JD Vance emphasized the U.S. commitment to leading in AI. He warned against excessive regulation that could stifle innovation, pledged to keep AI free from ideological bias, and stress.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, chat. I think this is a great summary, but actually, let's pretend like you're talking to my teenage nephew. who speaks in like a really like aggressive Alpha, Gen Z slang. And pretend like you're talking to him and you're explaining to him and his friends on what JD Vance's speech was about. So can you go ahead and summarize that speech for us in that Gen Alpha, Gen Z slang and like really turn it up, like really be obnoxious about it?
Oh, for sure. So JD Vance basically pulled up and was like, yo, the US is going to stay boss level in AI, no cap. He said we can't let too many rules cramp our style, and AI's got to stay unbiased. Also, he was hyped about AI creating mad jobs. Straight up fire speech.
I appreciate it, chat. I can feel my son and nephew cringing from here.
Glad I could help. If you need me to tone it down, just say the word.
All right, chat. We'll leave it there. Any final parting words for the audience?
Sure thing. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Keep being awesome and curious about AI. Catch you later.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of that. I hope that wasn't your first time being exposed to our voice modality at OpenAI and the multimodality of these models. But obviously what we were just interacting with was the voice mode and the multimodality aspect of our models. Specifically, that's the GPT-4o voice mode. You can see I'm doing this within ChatGPT, and you can see I get the full transcript of kind of the conversation. One of the things you probably saw me do a couple of times was actually interact with tool use. So we actually had the voice mode go and search the web and find out information, for example, about ACT-IAC, and actually was able to search and actually get here specifically some of the links that it went to when it searched and what it found. Again, similar here when we asked it to go find JD Vance's speech in Paris, it was able to pull that information. If you have not played around with the voice mode, I highly, highly recommend that just spend some time. It is fascinating. It's just kind of a unique way to experience this technology overall. I use it a lot to just clarify my thoughts. Once a week, a couple times a week, I'll take my dog out for a walk and I start voice mode on my phone. I put an earbud in and I was like, hey, chat, I'm just going to tell you about my day. And I just, I'm going to talk, explain what's on my mind. Don't interrupt me, just say, and at the end of it, I'm going to ask you what I need to do. And so I just go in 20 minutes, just go for a walk and just talk to myself a little bit like a crazy person. We're talking to AI. And then at the end of it, get back and I was like, all right, chat, what do I need to do? What are the top 10 things I need to do now that I'm back? And, I'll walk around and be like, I need to go do, this, I need to send my boss this email recap of the meeting with ACT-IAC. I need to prepare a demo. I need to go think about, our Q2 strategy. And I'll talk about all different things on a personal level. I've got these doctor's appointments, etc. And I just kind of ramble. And then at the end of it, ask ChatGPT to summarize it for me is a really kind of powerful way to interact with the AI. We're going to come back and do some more demos in a second because I think that's really the best part about this. I'm going to first flip to just a handful of quick slides, and then from here, we'll be able to then we'll go back to demos and actually showing off the technology. And then what I hope to then do is leave a ton of time for questions and answers throughout the day. So OpenAI, who we are at our core is a research laboratory. So OpenAI was founded in 2015 with the nonprofit mission of ensuring AGI benefits all of humanity. And so we really started as a nonprofit trying to figure out how to build this thing we called artificial general intelligence. It's a term that I think our executives and others have admitted has lost a little bit of its meaning, and just because it means so many things to so many different people. But the reality is what we're trying to do is build systems that are as capable of humans at doing many of the tasks that humans do. So again, we started with a research lab doing all sorts of unique things, everything from building robotics to doing video game simulations, because we thought that that might be the way to get to these systems that can learn about the world. And ultimately, what we did was landed on this idea of large language models. So large language models at their core, some of those folks in this AI group are probably very familiar, are these statistical models that try to predict, started off specifically very at a very basic level, predicting the next word in a phrase. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but if you simplify it, really it's predicting the next word. So if I say the capital of France is, we train a large model to basically be able to predict that next word in that sentence is Paris, or some probability could be is located in France or something like that. So again, there's a certain statistical probable distribution on predicting what that next word is. So again, very, very simple. And these are what we called our GPT models, these generative pre-trained transformer models. that started off very, very simply predicting this next word. And then what we found is then by scaling them to really large levels, you got some amazing results. So again, we started off with GPT-1, which was very uncoherent. And then GPT-2 started getting some cogent outputs. And then really GPT-3 is where we really started that. We then have moved from being just a nonprofit to being a nonprofit that oversees a for-profit subsidiary. Partially is because what we realized is these ideas called scaling laws, which meant that the way that we got better and better models was by training, by scaling the size of these models, and we can get better and better outputs. So we formed then a profit, and then we very famously launched ChatGPT in November of 2022. And really, that was the moment that OpenAI went from just a research lab to also being a product company. So ChatGPT, just incredibly successful product. And now we work just in a product company, but also in a deployment company to help customers figure out how to deploy and how to get the benefit of this technology for their organizations. And that's the part of the organization I sit in. ChatGPT Gov, we have shared publicly the latest numbers that we've shared publicly, and they are even higher than this today. We are over 500 million weekly active users. Something close to 10% of the world's population uses ChatGPT on a weekly basis. So at this point, a pretty broadly distributed product. Specifically, I talked a little bit about these scaling laws, and we starting at the bottom of this chart, we started with scaling what we call pre-training. So these models are these large runs to train the model on like the world's knowledge, or basically all the knowledge on the internet, to predict what the next word in a sequence is. And we call that process pre-training here at OpenAI. And that's where we get the GPT-3, GPT-4. We announced the GPT 4.5 model, which we actually just announced that we're going to retire in favor of a GPT 4.1 model. If you're playing along, we are very, very bad at naming things at OpenAI and fully admit that and are okay with that. But again, we have these GPT models, and we've scaled pre-trained. What we then, moving up from the bottom of that stack, what we started doing is then doing post-training and scaling different modalities. And so specifically speech. So you saw me demo that earlier when we were using our voice-to-voice mode, our speech-to-speech. And so we have that. We have a new text-to-image model that we released just about 2 weeks ago, which you might have seen your social media feeds be filled with anime pictures of your friends and family. A lot of that had to do with our image generation model, which is very, very good at taking a picture and turning it into an anime style. Something that's called Studio Ghibli style is something that we saw happen a lot. And then, so again, we also have announced our video model, which is our text-to-video model, which is called Sora. From there, we've also done a lot of work on tool use. And so what we mean by that is the ability for these models not just to reason and know about their own internal knowledge, but the ability for them to use tools. So things like the ability for these models to search the web. So you saw that in the voice mode demo, the ability for these models to search the web, and be able to pull things like that. You have also the ability to use a Python IDE or a development environment so that the model can not only write code, but then execute its own code to understand something. And then finally, and then many different company connectors in order to be able to connect to your own company knowledge and your own company data and search across that. And so we announced a early version of that we launched in our team plan just about a week or two ago, which is a connector to the Google Drive suite of services, and many, many more coming very soon. And then finally, the last couple I'll mention and the scaling dimensions is reasoning. So reasoning is a fairly new paradigm we announced probably just about 6 months ago, late last year, which we announced with our O1 reasoning model. And these reasoning models do something a little bit different than what these traditional large language models have done, which is rather than give you an instant answer, they first think through in a way that kind of like humans somewhat think. And that is really amazing because it allows for some amazing capability. Reasoning is one of the things I personally am most excited about because it unlocks a lot of capabilities that are really, really important. Specifically, one of the capabilities they allow is for the next category, which is agents. And so when we talk about agents, what we mean is models, applications that can really do things in the world for you. So historically, ChatGPT and other AI tools have been this chat interface that, I ask a question, it gives me a response. I ask a question, it gives me a response. So I'm getting a pretty instant answer. With reasoning, we started getting a little bit longer where it wouldn't give me an instant answer. It might take, 30 seconds to a minute to answer the question. But now with agents, what we can do is actually have these models go and do work on your behalf. So if folks have used deep research, that is an example of that. And we'll hopefully get a chance to demo that today. So I love sharing this slide, a little bit complicated, but I'll walk you through it very quickly. This is my AI strategy on one slide. So especially for those of you who worked in agencies or individual organizations, and you are responsible for your AI strategy or thinking about what that AI strategy should be for your organization. This is my recommendation on one slide of what your AI strategy should be. Feel free to take a screenshot of it. Really, the idea is your AI strategy should be twofold. So the first is you need a bottoms up strategy. So starting on the bottom left of this chart, and then you also need a tops down strategy. And so when you think about a bottoms up strategy, what we mean by that is how do you just put AI in the hands of your employees today? The reality is these tools exist right now. As we mentioned with ChatGPT alone, we have about 10% of the world's population using ChatGPT and on a weekly basis. And there's other tools out there. So many individuals are probably already starting to use some AI in their work, and it really just has a tremendous amount of benefit. So what you need to do as an enterprise is be able to provide an enterprise grade version of those tools. We're very biased. We have a tool called ChatGPT Enterprise, which we think is the best. There's others out there, but really the idea is how do you just expose these tools to your employees in a way that allows them to take the benefit of it. Different than a top-down strategy, which I'll explain in a sec. But to maybe further align on the point of the bottoms-up strategy, I'd love to share a story out of the DoD, the Department of Defense, and specifically they had this task force Lima, and they had the captain who ran, the Captain Lugo, shares a story of when he was thinking about DoD use in the military. He initially jumped in and said, "Who wants to use generative AI for their work?" And one of the groups that raised their hands was the Army chaplains. So the priests of the military raised their hand and said, "We want to be using generative AI." And so Lugo was like, "All right, this is interesting. I'm going to take this meeting." So he goes and meets with the chaplains and he's like, "Why do you want to use AI?" And their answer was, "We wanted to write our sermons." And he kind of took a step back and he was like, "Isn't that a core part of your job? Isn't that what you do here? Why would you want AI to do that?" And their answer was, "Our job is to care for the mental health of our service members. The less time I spend writing sermons is more time I can spend one-on-one with the warfighters that need my help, and I would rather be doing that." And that was just a very powerful moment. And I love sharing that because there's a certain point of like, Lugo and the Pentagon was not going to come out of the Pentagon and like find out who will use AI for what and point to the Army chaplains to do that. That only happened because there happened to be an Army chaplain who had used AI in his personal life and understood what it could do and where it could help and wanted to bring that to his work. And so the idea of this bottoms-up strategy is how do you just enable that? How do you harness that and allow folks to use this technology in a responsible way and kind of the right way that your data is not being used to retrain models and not being leaked anyway, but really bring it to you in that way. That is different than from the tops-down strategy. So the tops-down strategy is there are ways that AI is going to revolutionize the way that your agency, your organization achieves its mission. That could be something as simple as the way you do customer service. So let's say you are the IRS, and obviously it is tax day today, which is a reminder. I need to submit one more thing myself. And based on today, they're getting overwhelmed with the number of calls, et cetera. And so one of the things that the IRS does is provide citizen services on understanding the tax code and what needs to be done. And it's like, well, could the IRS leverage these AI models, generative AI, in order to better do that? And so unfortunately, you're not going to get an AI solution out of the box that is perfect at doing that for the IRS. What they're probably going to have to do is build a bespoke solution using AI models that brings into account kind of proprietary IRS's databases, some citizen-facing services, et cetera, and build something unique. You can pick any agency and do something similar. So, but the idea is how do you do this tops down and these bottoms up strategies together? And then you see kind of this middle part as well, where you can bring your data to these AI models in a more kind of comprehensive way. So again, love to spend some time on just kind of how our perspective on how to think about AI strategy. But again, the takeaway here is you need to do both. You need to do a bottoms up strategy as well as a tops down strategy. So speaking of that, very quick, just overview, I wanted to provide a summary of what specific products OpenAI offers to government agencies and the public sector. I'll do this pretty quickly, but again, what we do at our core is we make the IP of these generative AI models. So again, very good at naming things at OpenAI, but you'll hear things like GPT-4o, our O1 reasoning models. We just announced yesterday a new model we call GPT 4.1, which is very good at coding and has a very large context window. So we make the underlying IP for these models, and then we expose those to customers in a API product. And so that is for a developer to build on top of these models. So you think about that tops down strategy, that's what we offer there, is an API product. And then what we have for government as well is an enterprise version of ChatGPT. That's the tool that I'm demoing with today. But again, it's an enterprise version of ChatGPT where your data is private and secure to your area. We guarantee there's no retraining on your data. And it is a way to leverage all that in an enterprise-grade environment. You have a compliance API in order to, ensure that users are using the tool in a compliant way, and a lot more features, functionalities that I'm happy to talk to anyone about. We then, and this product runs as a full software as a service today in Microsoft's Azure commercial region. And so again, we operate this product today. So this is actually our preferred path for most civilian government agencies. We'd actually guide you and steer you towards ChatGPT Enterprise. The challenge we have is that this runs again in Azure Commercial and is not yet FedRAMP as a product. We are actively working on that accreditation path. We had a little bit of a hiccup in that we were working with USAID as our agency sponsor for the FedRAMP process, and obviously have had to make a little bit of a pivot there given the change of status that agency, but are now working with a couple other agencies on getting to a FedRAMP accreditation. And we have had a couple of agencies already that we're working with give us provisional authorizations or some sort of interim authorities to test. So we're happy to work with agencies on that. So separately, we have a very interesting and complicated relationship at OpenAI with Microsoft. So Microsoft is a phenomenal research partner of ours. They are our cloud provider. As I mentioned, we run on Azure, and they're also an investor in the for-profit subsidiary of OpenAI. And as part of that relationship, they have access to our IP. So our scientists, engineers, researchers are building these next generation, this frontier of models. And then Microsoft has access to that IP to be able to run it themselves. So Microsoft has a service that they offer called Azure OpenAI. Azure OpenAI is a Microsoft product sold and supported by Microsoft. Despite having OpenAI in the name, nothing to do with OpenAI. It is a Microsoft product supported. If you are a customer of that today, love that you are using our underlying IP, but that's a Microsoft product, nothing to do with OpenAI or myself or my team today. But one of the things that Microsoft did do, which I'm a big fan of, is they took the Azure OpenAI service and they moved it into their government regions. So some of you may be familiar, Microsoft runs several government cloud regions. So they run a government community cloud, as well as classified clouds at both the secret and top secret level. And they have moved the Azure OpenAI service into those and have now received the full DISA accreditation across all of those.
Okay. No! What tried to sir? No, he didn't.
Apologize, I'm getting a little background. It looks like someone might not be on mute.
Oh, no one is having.
Mute their microphones.
So that is, so again, we are working on, so the Azure OpenAI service is accredited. So if you had the need for a workload that you wanted to run kind of this top-down way for a application that leverages our GPT-4o model, and you needed it to run in a top secret environment on JWIX, for example, you are able to do that today. You can go call Microsoft and they will provide you access to the GPT-4o model on their top secret cloud. However, what we saw happening at OpenAI is everybody was taking these accredited APIs. So again, remember is that the Azure OpenAI API is an API. So it's equivalent to our API. It's not ChatGPT. And so what we saw happening is that all these agencies were rebuilding their own chat interfaces to these models and trying to create a clone of ChatGPT or another chatbot in order to provide access to their employees for this model. So one of the top use cases initially was, let's provide that internal AI assistant, that ChatGPT-like product. And so you have things like Nipper GPT, Camo GPT, DHS chat, state chat, VA chat, etc. I can basically take an agency name, at chat or GPT on the back of it, and more likely someone has created that end user chat application. And so what we took a look at this market opportunity and said, you know what, we are very good at building chatbots and building this AI application. And so why don't we build that? And so we launched just about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, a product we call ChatGPT Gov. So ChatGPT Gov is an end user application that looks and feels just like ChatGPT. So it's a chatbot application that leverages the Azure OpenAI service to run in your environment. So what we actually did as well is took a deployment model is rather than trying to host this as a service, which would require us to go through the full cloud authorization process or something like FedRAMP or the equivalent DoD or Intel certifications. Instead, what we said is we're going to hand the customers the code like an old school software license so that it will run inside of your own Azure tenant. So it still needs to run in Azure, but that way it will run inside of your own Azure tenant. And so what we do is we provide this application that builds and looks and feels just like ChatGPT that leverages the Azure OpenAI service on the backend. So again, ChatGPT Gov is available today and is available to run inside of your environment. Again, the distinction that I would say between Gov and Enterprise, when possible, Enterprise is going to be a better solution just because we have full control over it and we're able to offer a lot more. The challenge we have is authorization and accreditation for use today. And so again, we are pursuing that very actively for FedRAMP process and getting to FedRAMP moderate. So if you just need FedRAMP moderate data, our strong suggestion is ChatGPT Enterprise. So that's going to be a better product and we can work with you on a provisional or interim authority to test. However, if you have requirements for US persons or classified environments, that's where ChatGPT Gov is going to be a better fit because Microsoft has the Azure OpenAI service accredited in those environments. So anyways, that's a little bit about the environment. Just some quick key lessons, and then this will be my last slide, and I can jump to actually some more demos, and then we'll pause for questions. So one of the ones I'd love to share is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So just maybe about 3 weeks ago or a month ago, I was up in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, where we had Governor Shapiro announce the results of a 1-year pilot program they had done with us and ChatGPT Enterprise at the state. And so Governor Shapiro himself was on stage saying that their employees had saved 8 hours per week, so almost a day a week, by using ChatGPT Enterprise. And so really some phenomenal lessons learned. They actually published about a 60-page report on all their findings. They surveyed their users every 2 weeks. And so really commend the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania team on kind of the depth of analysis that they did, but really saw some phenomenal results really across job families, across experience of using AI, across tenure at the organization, but really just some incredible usage there. We've also seen some really good work coming out of the national labs. So the US national lab system have been phenomenal users and advocates of generative AI, and really for pushing science is something that we're really focused on. One story I love to share is we did a 1,000 scientists AI jam, so a big hackathon about a month ago with the national lab system. So we had 11 national labs participate. We sent folks from OpenAI to each of those national labs. So I myself went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee to go to Oak Ridge National Lab. And we did a same-day hackathon across all 1,000 scientists. We ended up getting about 1,500 scientists to really try to see how they could use our reasoning model specifically on advancing AI or advancing scientific research. My favorite story is out of Brookhaven National Labs. We actually had a physicist who was especially in this specialist in this one specific area of physics, and he actually was working with our O3 mini reasoning model and pushing the frontier of the science he knew, and realized that he was actually starting to explore an unknown area of science with this model. And so just after 3 hours of working with the O3 model, he was actually able to publish a paper based on the findings he found with that. So actually AI was actually working directly with him to create net new science at his guidance and direction, but be able to pull that in. And some other good stories at the state of Minnesota. But actually, let me pause there and I will switch to a demo. Before I kick off the demo, let me see if there's any specific questions or anything I can answer as well. All right, so I'm just glancing through the chat. Okay, I think there are some good questions about FedRAMP and other aspects of it. there's a good question about government regulating the government regulation. Let me jump to the demos, and actually I'll come back to it. It's a great question, and I want to show that. Let me jump to demos, and I'll come back to a question like that in a second. So what I'm using today is the demo is just ChatGPT Enterprise. So in this case, I'm just going to start off with a very simple, let's write a haiku about ACT-IAC. And so just with this simple prompt, you can see government and tech, ACT-IAC bridges the gap, innovation looms. So one of the things that these models are also very good at is translation. So just with a very simple prompt, I can ask the model to go ahead and translate the first line of the haiku into Japanese, second into Greek, third into Spanish. And so again, no problem at all. We can take that original haiku and actually translate into non-spoken languages as well. So in this case, we're going to ask it to translate the first line into Braille, second into Morse code, and third into binary. And so again, the model has no problem translating between these different languages in the way it was trained. One thing I also wanted to show is the ability to bring in tool use. So we talked a little bit about the importance of tool use when we talked about scaling, but here's another example. I can ask the model to take all of our conversations so far and write some Python code to generate a word cloud library of this as well. So sorry, joys of live demos. It is slowing down here. This might be my internet. Let me try that one more time. So again, everything I am doing is live and trying to run it right now. And so you can see here, what the model is able to do is actually write the Python code to actually take all this, import this word cloud library, and actually do it. So again, it is still going through and writing it right now. Getting a little bit of a delay here. But so what I have asked the model to do is execute this code. And so what you see the model doing is it's doing something a little different. Rather than answering right away, you see this analyzing section. And what it's doing is actually writing the Python code. In this case, it's also going to create and execute this code. So again, it imports a word cloud library. It then brings in all the text of the conversation and then runs this plot.show command. And so in a second, we should see it here. Again, it's running a little slower than I would like right now. Again, the joys of a live demo, but you'll be able to see it here. Excuse me. So that is a little bit of this file. And again, apologize. Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and kick off a new one, and we can come back and see if that one finishes in a second here. So what I want to show now is another example of this tool use, which is around a data set and how we can actually use these models to analyze some data. So in this case, I'm going to try to bring in a data set here. So give me a second as I find this on my computer here. So when I'm trying to download this data set and bring it in right now is a data set that includes flights out of New York City in a specific month of January 2013. So in this case, here's this data set. I'm just going to upload that to ChatGPT Enterprise here. So I just uploaded this CSV file. And I'm just going to say describe what's in this data. Be helpful if I can spell. And so again, just with a very simple prompt, describe what's in this data and uploading this CSV file, you see the model once again is using some tools. So it's analyzing, and I'll be able to go back and show you the code in a second here. But what it's able to tell me is that this data set contains 27,000 flight records from New York City in this month. And there's 29 columns, and here's some of the key columns. So things like flight timing, flight identification, route. And again, it's able to actually tell you an example flight from the data set. So how did the model actually do this? And so we can click this view analysis here. And so what the model did is wrote some Python code. And specifically, again, some of your data scientists, you may follow along on this very quick. If not, no need to worry about the specifics. But it imported a library called pandas, loaded the data set, started showing basic information about the flight, and was able to run some summary information based off of writing and executing its own code, and then taking that code, results of that, bringing back at, and then translating that into very simple language that I can see here. So again, I can actually ask the model then to say, what are 3 interesting visualizations? Scribe and create them. Again, spelling not my necessarily forte here, so apologize for that. But you can see again, I just asked for 3 interesting visualizations. And so with that, it's going ahead and doing the same thing. So in this case, it's importing a new library. It's going to bring in the average arrival delay by airline. It looks like it's also trying to do the number of flights per day and the top 10 most frequent routes. So it pulled all those data sets in. And with that is going to then be able to run this plot.show command in order to show those in a second here. So again, what the model is doing is showing tool use here. So it's not just analyzing data, but it's really also being able to write and then execute code in order to be able to analyze that data set as well. So again, it should be popping up here in a second here momentarily. But again, I think this key is really, really important, because what really distinguishes just large language models from being able to predict kind of that next word, that next token, to really being really helpful assistants in the world is this ability to be able to use tools the way we do it. And so we'll see a lot more of that when we talk about things like deep research as well. Again, this is taking a little longer than I would expect again. Let me go ahead and jump to the next one. We'll come back and we'll see this demo in a second here. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a new chat window here. So here we have just another version of ChatGPT. I wanted to switch gears and talk about our reasoning models a little bit. So one of the things that our models used to be very, very poor at is connections. So I don't know how many on the line have ever heard of the connections game from the New York Times. So connections is a game where you have to take 16 daily game where you get presented with 16 words and you have to group them into 4 categories of 4. And there's usually some interesting kind of twists and games. So I took this puzzle from connections from some time back. And so what we did is we gave the model, grouped these 16 words into 4 categories of 4 words each. So you can see slice, sneak, tired, etc. You can read it through. And you can see the model, instead of giving me an instant response, is looking like it's doing this reasoning step. So it's actually reasoning here and thinking a little bit before responding to my question. And so what I'm not going to get is an instant answer the way I normally get with ChatGPT. Instead, what the model is doing is thinking in a separate kind of scratch pad about how it should respond to it. What's amazing is that allows the model to think before it responds. And so there are many different types of problems, and some that are helped by thinking and some that are not helped by thinking. You could think, if any of you have read the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, by Daniel Kahneman, who introduced this idea of, this fast type thinking and slow type thinking. And so in this specific case, there are certain problems like connections, which are better with more thinking, and other problems that don't necessarily get better. So if I ask you, for example, what's the capital of Bhutan? If you don't know it, and I say, think about it for a week, you're not going to get to a better answer. But if I gave you this connections puzzle and I said, think about it for a week, you'll probably get a better answer than if you answered right away. And so that's what these reasoning models are really trying to do. And so you can see in this case, it reasoned about this word categorization problem for 49 seconds and ultimately gave us this categorization, things that are ring shaped, approval, golf mishits, and verbs describing type of movement. And I can tell you this is the correct answer. This specific connections puzzle is tricky because there's a lot of categories. So you have bread, slice, shank, which seem like they are bread related or some sort in food category. And so if you play connections, that's the trick. There's a lot of times these like misleading categories. And so that's the puzzle to it. And so again, the model previously GPT-4o could not solve these effectively on a regular basis because it would just kind of pick a solution, predict the word, and then get stuck down that path and could not backtrack and correct itself. And what we're seeing with these reasoning models is they are able to do that backtrack and correcting of itself. So reasoning models are extremely, extremely important and a huge, we think, leapfrog in kind of capabilities because it allows net new capabilities. I'm going to show that in a second with deep research, but let me jump back and see if our flight analysis demo is, looks like it's still stuck here, so I'm going to stop it. Let me try it. Let me say try again. Let's see if this is, it will kick off here. So jumping back to our reasoning models. So one of the things that's amazing about reasoning models is it allows us to think through different types of problems that we have not been able to solve. So let me share one other problem with our O3 mini high model. And so again, another sample reasoning question is, if I print all of Wikipedia on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, how many shacks high would it be? So how many Shaquille O'Neal's tall would it be? So again, very interesting kind of question. You can probably guess right away. But if I asked you this question, you might start thinking about, all right, well, how do I estimate this? How do I first estimate how many pages are on Wikipedia? How tall is Shaquille O'Neal, and how does that relate to, paper stacked on the page, et cetera? And so these are, again, this is kind of a silly brain teaser question, but again, a type of question that the reasoning models are much, much better answering than traditional large language models. So I'll let this run. I ran this in our O3 mini high, which is a version of our reasoning model that thinks a little longer. So this will take probably about 1.5 minutes to kind of come back and do so. Let me jump back, and then actually I already finished a little faster than I thought. So 48 seconds.
Hey, Philippe, you're not sharing your screen. I don't know if you mean to share your screen, but we don't see it. I don't see it anyways.
I do see it.
I'm seeing it.
Okay, never mind.
No worries.
Yeah.
I think
Check your other monitor, maybe. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, sorry about that if you're not seeing it. Again, I think I am. Others are able to see it, so thank you. Maybe at the top, you might see like kind of the share screen button. But again, you can see here, going back to this Wikipedia example, how this specific model took this reasoning. So again, it went through and talked about the number of pages, converted the pages to a stack height, and then converting feet to shack height, and ultimately was able to come up with about 285 to 300 shacks tall is what it would be. And you can ask much more detailed follow-up questions around what are your assumptions, what things would change it, et cetera. You'd be able to get things like that. Looks like we're still having some issues here on our reasoning, on our code use model, but I'll jump to one of the things. So again, this brain teaser problem is interesting, but what's really impactful now is how these models can actually start to unlock net new capabilities. And specifically, I want to talk about a product that we launched called Deep Research. So Deep Research, we launched, you can see back in February, is one of our first agents. And so what Deep Research does is something that can actually take action in the world for you. So you can see here, this example, compile a research report on retail industry changing in the last 3 years. First thing the model does is ask you to clear some clarifying questions. So do you want e-commerce? Do you want behavior shifts, supply chain challenges? And then again, like any good research system, ask some clarifying questions. This is like all global perspective. And then the model say, great, I'm going to go do a detailed research report for you. And here's what I'm going to go cover. And then the model will go off and asynchronously go do this task. And so in this case, you can watch the model and see what it's doing. So this is powered by our O3 reasoning model, so an unreleased model at the moment, but a model, very powerful reasoning model, which is able to, because of its reasoning ability, start planning and thinking about what it needs to do, plus using tools. So in this case, is able to search the web and then go back and review some data, find more information from the web, come back, and if needed, actually use that code interpreter as well to do much more. So Deep Research is absolutely incredible. If any of you have not used it, I highly, highly, highly recommend to go try Deep Research on something that you know well. As of February 25th, Deep Research is available for all Plus users. So it is only available in our paid tiers today. So the $20 subscription or above. Folks on this call, if you have an interest in Deep Research and never been able to access it, I'll put my email in the chat. Send me a quick note, and I'm happy to provide you, a couple of days access so you can just go try out Deep Research. I think it's that impactful. I'm going to share a very personal story actually with Deep Research, because I just think to show why I personally am so excited about it. And it's something we've shared publicly, so very personal. You'll understand in a second. So my wife and I are navigating breast cancer. So she was diagnosed with breast cancer a few months back, maybe about 5 months ago. Been obviously a very challenging time, as you can imagine. We've gone through double mastectomy, chemotherapy, and we've been using AI to help us navigate this process a lot in many unique ways. But specifically with deep research, we had an issue with her treatment, not an issue, but a decision point, whether we had to decide whether we were going to do radiation after doing chemotherapy. And so we had to make this decision. And so we actually spoke with her oncologist, and they said, you're very much in a gray area, whether you should or shouldn't. I recommend you go speak with a radiation specialist. We went and met with a specialist. He said, wow, you're really in a gray area for your specific case. I recommend yes, but I could also be convinced no, you should go get a second opinion. So we actually went and met with a second radiation specialist on this specific case. He said, no, you shouldn't. And here was why. And so ultimately the decision was on us on how to think through that. And so I internally had access to deep research before it was released publicly. And so we said, hey, why don't we give this thing a shot? And so we actually went to deep research, and might be able to pull it up actually, switch accounts. And so I actually was able to I think this one. Nope, sorry. Let me find the other one. Well, actually, let me just pause on sharing the specific one. But what we were able to do was actually get deep research to write us a report on the specific case that she had. So we were able to actually go through and deep research. Basically, we gave her the surgical pathology report on the specific cancer she had. And then my wife herself wrote this phenomenal prompt about, based on this specific patient, what are the pros and cons of radiation after 6 rounds of this specific type of chemotherapy? And then, give us a report on the pros and cons. And we just let it run. I'm not exaggerating that when I got back this report, so it took about 20 minutes on its own to go kind of do the research. When I got back, I was absolutely shaking when I read this report, because it not only confirmed everything that we had already met with 3 separate specialists in this area. We have had a lot of conversations. And now all the detail that they had provided us was here in this report with much, much more detail, cited sources, cited specific studies on the NIH website and other aspects of it. And it was just so amazing to kind of see that level of depth there. This happened to be a very good use case for deep research because, and I actually spoke with the CIO of the National Cancer Institute about this as well after. And what he said is what was amazing about this specific question and this report is that in cancer research, everything is publicly available. We're trying to solve cancer together. So it's all publicly posted on the cancer website, on the NIH website and other websites. And so deep research was able to use this reasoning model to plan out what it needed to do, its knowledge of breast cancer and what it needed to have and radiation, and then start searching the web and pulling in other studies about what happened, what courses of action were, and then really summarize that, not in just a general summary, but in a way that was very specific to my wife's case. And so what the CIO of the NIH told me was, this report wasn't anything that a great oncologist wouldn't tell you on your own. But one oncologist has 8 hours to go write you this personalized report. And so really, it was just such an amazing experience to see the research. That's obviously a much more personal and deep experience, but really everything from, I will run deep research reports usually on a daily basis, multiple times a day, everything from preparing for customer meetings, understanding specifically an agency's background and what they're doing, where it'll go and search the web and really summarize all this rich information back to me. So it's the first taste of what agents are looking like, of what things that can do actual actions in the world for you. So with that, let me pause there. Thank you all for the time. I think we have about 8 minutes, and so I am happy to take some questions.
So Felipe, if you would please go through the list of questions, pick the one you are comfortable answering, and repeat them aloud, because for people who are on the call, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me take 1 or 2 of those, and then James, I see you have your hand up. I'm happy to take some live questions as well. So one of the questions there is around tips and techniques to improve better prompt engineering and getting better outcomes. So I think there's definitely a lot of art to this, and the reality is it's constantly evolving. So maybe the best meta suggestion I'll give, and then I'll give some more practical tips, is, there's a quote I love, which is, you unfortunately do not get fit by reading about working out. You have to go to the gym. And in the world of AI, getting fit is using AI. And so there is no substitute for being a user of this technology. You can read about AI all you want. You can come to phenomenal panels and events like this, but there is no substitute for being a user of AI directly. And so my number one tip on kind of getting better at prompting is just start prompting a ton. So the other thing, so that's general guidance. The other thing I'll share is how much effort I take to prompting the model is going to be proportional to how long the model takes to respond. So when I'm interacting with GPT-4o, I might not actually spend a lot of time prompting it. So you saw some of my prompts were pretty simple, like write a haiku, do this, XYZ, because I can always just correct the model back and forth. So it gives me a response instantly, and it's like, that's not exactly what I wanted. I just tell the model that's not what I wanted. And then it can adjust and correct itself. Versus, for example, the reasoning models actually take a lot more time to respond, or especially things like deep research with an agent. So when I'm writing my deep research prompt, I take a lot more time to think about what I want the model to really think through, what I want it to research, because it's going to go do work for 20 minutes. And so if it doesn't do what I wanted it to, I wasted a bunch of time. And so I'm a little bit more thoughtful about what I want. Here's another meta tip is you can actually use the faster model, so like GPT-4o, to help you write deep research prompts. So again, a little bit meta, but it's something that works very, very well. We also have a bunch of prompting guides. Prompting, especially if you're doing an API build application, and so you're using these models for a specific application, is really, really, really important. Again, it'll be a little less important when you're using kind of the chatbot interface for your own usage. The final tip I'll give you is these models are incredibly intelligent. So, you used to say like, oh, here's like an intern in your pocket. I would say like, especially as with some of these more advanced models, it's starting to get to like a PhD in your pocket. But it's this brilliant PhD who knows a ton about the world, but doesn't know anything about you or your problems. And so context is king there. So how do you give the model context on the problems you're working with? How do you bring in as much information as possible about what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, what the goals and objectives are, and the model can help you figure it out together. So again, just providing the model more and more context is really one of the best tips there. Let me switch to a live question. James, I see you have your hand up. Happy to go to that next.
Hey, thanks. So I actually have a question about pricing. So like one of the reasons why I think a lot of businesses and agencies are rolling their own ChatGPT-ish clone is because like it's cheaper to, have a chatbot called the API. But like this ChatGPT Gov, is it charged by consumption or is it charged by seat like ChatGPT Enterprise? Because like a lot of people, at least what we're considering is, hey, well, what if we could just have a consumption-based chatbot and then for the power users get, let's say, like give them a seat in ChatGPT Enterprise or something like that. Like that would be cheaper, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, great question, James. So on the Gov product side, it is a hybrid model because you pay us a license fee today for ChatGPT Gov, but you still have consumption-based pricing with Azure because this is running inside of your own Azure tenant for ChatGPT Gov. And so that runs inside of your own tenant. So you're still paying Microsoft the bill for running that product and service. The per seat license fee is much, much lower than even the enterprise side, just because of the way that product is designed and what it works. But again, I would recommend, again, very biased here, but our perspective is that agencies should not be building their own chatbots, even if it is cheaper, because over the long run, it is going to be more expensive. And the idea is that you're just not going to be able to keep up with people who do this full time doing this work. And so that's our strong belief. On the enterprise side, I will share, there's definitely feedback we've gotten in the past from customers. And let's take the national labs, for example, that they have, one of the challenges that we have is that on a per seat model is that it is a per seat model, whether you are a super advanced power user of ChatGPT and you are hitting limits on reasoning models and deep research all day long, or if you are a very casual user, maybe using it to rewrite an email once in a while, you're just paying the same per seat cost. And so that's definitely a known challenge. And no breaking news to share today, but I will share we are working is a known challenge, and we're working on some new commercial models that will help change that a little bit. I'm happy to talk to folks one-on-one. I just don't want to share it in a public forum today. So feel free to reach out to me and happy to talk through that. But we're effectively, our goal is that ChatGPT Enterprise is that bottoms up solution for all agency and all of your agency users, not just your power users. And so we are working on commercial models that will make that more justifiable. I'll share that, and then just kind of happy to talk with folks one-on-one and share much more details there, or there'll be more news to share in the near future.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome. Perfect. And I just dropped my email in the chat. Again, if folks have not used deep research or any of those tools and want like a couple of day access, feel free to send me a note and happy to provide that. So there's another question in the chat here about ChatGPT protecting PII, HIPAA information, such as in the deep research example. So let me share my screen one more time. Let me just share one aspect of it. So there's definitely a lot of misnomer in the industry about AI models taking everybody's information and stealing it. I will just share that, specifically for our enterprise products, we have what we call our enterprise privacy page. And you can see here, so for any of our business products, so that includes ChatGPT Team, Enterprise, EDU, and the API platform. Here are our commitments. First of all, you own and control your data. So we do not train on any business data by default. You own all the inputs and outputs. You get to control how long your data is retained. You control who has access. And again, we have comprehensive security and compliance, things like our SOC 2 report, data encryption and transit and at rest. And then we have a full trust portal. I should click on here, where you can actually see a lot of our compliance certification attestations, things like, again, our SOC 1, 2, 3, our text ramp report, penetration testing report, security white papers, et cetera. So again, for folks that are interested in doing a deeper compliance dive, we have this trust portal. So it's at trust.openai.com. And then finally, for anyone who is in a consumer plan and you're worried about training, OpenAI, having access to your data. So if you just go to your settings, you go to data control, there's this button, improve the model for everyone. It is a one-click opt-out. You can see I'm in an enterprise plan, so it is automatically disabled. But if you happen to have a personal ChatGPT account and want to ensure that data is never retained or used, that is absolutely something that, you can turn off that, and then none of the data is stored in our training pipeline. Again, there's a lot more detail specifically around HIPAA and some specific requirements there. But just generally, again, and it goes to your personal usage, is how do you comfort level. Again, the benefits that I got from using deep research for our personal healthcare drastically outweighed any of the risks that we were taking. So again, taking a risk-based approach. And actually, I know we're at time. Maybe just one final comment on risk-based approach. These models are probabilistic. They always don't work. And so having the right framework and guardrail system around how to actually use their output is incredibly important. One thing to note is I take very different tacks on when I'm using it and how much I have to review. So if I was, for example, let's say translating our cafeteria menu from English to Spanish, I would just copy and paste that output straight into ChatGPT, copy the output, just go ahead and paste it as is, because the downside risk of getting wrong is not that big of a deal. Versus if I was signing a contract, I might have ChatGPT review for any legal provisions or terms I should be worried about, but I will still have a lawyer and attorney review that contract. And so again, taking a risk-based approach is going to be important as you start building systems and how you leverage generative AI. So I know we are at time. So with that, I know there's a couple more questions in the chat, but again, you can see my email again, fmillon@openai.com. Feel free to reach out, especially if you want access for a couple of days to try things like deep research on your own. Again, there is no substitute for being a user and trying this technology. Again, there are others out there. Use something. I'm very biased. I think OpenAI's tools are by far the best, but feel free to try them all and judge for yourself. So with that, Marshall or anyone from ACT-IAC, any final closing comments before we wrap the session today?
Well, thank you first. It was great. I hope people will ask you a question.
Marshall, sorry, I just realized I think we actually have till 1:30 or 1:30. Is that correct?
No, I think we have until 1, but Renata, feel free to tell me otherwise.
Yeah, we're trying to wrap up by 1.
Okay, fantastic.
Apologies.
No worries. We will wrap.
Thank you so much, Felipe. This was a great overview.
Fantastic.
All right. I'll just share the final ACT-IAC slide just for people that are members or not members. And once again, thank you very much, and looking forward to email you a ton of questions.
Thank you.
Fantastic.